Hey fellow animators, I am Illustrator. And we're back. We have finished skin test animation in the last episode, so we can finally move to skinning. At last. To finish the skin will take some time however, so be prepared for that. But after we are done with that, the character will be completed and ready for animation. So this is basically our final step remaining to do, even though not an easy one. But let's jump right into it. Okay, we have finished the skin test animation. We are in an animation mode, so the animation is playing fine. Alright, let's edit that terrible default skin. Go back to the modify panel, and here we will spend the majority of time while skinning. However, there is one mistake I did before. Before we edit all the bones to the skin modifier except the platforms and the main cat triangle, which is still correct. But that means we currently have both pelvis helper and pelvis bone in skin modifier. But that we don't want. The main pelvis bone shouldn't have any vertices weighted on it, because all of those will be on pelvis helper, so we can remove pelvis from this list. If we take a look on the weights, by clicking on edit envelopes, you can see pelvis has some weights and so does pelvis helper. But pelvis helper should have all the weights of this area, so let's remove the pelvis from here. It seemingly didn't change anything, but now all the weights from the pelvis area are on pelvis helper. Okay, so that's that. Sorry about the mistake, but at least it wasn't hard to fix. Okay, let's start by changing the default skin type first. If you now look more closely on some parts, you can see they are deforming really bad. The bone goes here, but the mesh is here. Let's do something about it. There isn't any single button solution which would do the whole skin for you, but we can at least get a better starting point. 3ds Max has implemented weight solvers since some later version, I think it was 2016 or so, not sure. But since then you have an option here to choose from voxel weight solver or a heat map. Start with voxel, and even when you leave it at default values, you can see that the deformations are immediately better. Not exactly done, but at least much better start. It has several parameters that you can play with. If we change the fall off, the result is a bit different, so you can try them out. There isn't any best number, it's just trial and error. And also what you should try out is a heat map, because for each character a different solution might be more suitable. For example, for Cooper here, the heat map works a bit better. And you can see that on some specific parts. For example, if we take a look at the fingers now, they look pretty alright. But if we switch back to the voxel, it's worse. Same for the shoulder area here. If we switch it back to the heat map, it looks better. So as with voxel, try to change the fall off to see if you can get a better result. I have played with it for a while and found out that 0.5 will work best here. What you should also change is max influence from 0 to 4. It's the same principle as this parameter down here. Bone effect limit. With a difference that one was just for the voxel solver and this one is global for the whole skin modifier. What it does is telling skin modifier that no vertex can be affected by more than 4 bones. This is important when you are going to use the character in game engines. It's a limitation for you when skinning, but bigger bone effect limit has an impact on performance. You shouldn't go over 4 if possible. But 8 is also acceptable if it's needed, because like I have said, sometimes it is quite limiting for some areas. But in most of the cases it can be done. For this character, 4 shouldn't be a big problem however. So that's all the basic setups for skin, let's start editing the weights. Activate edit envelopes, and that will start displaying colored zones which tell us what are the weights for those areas. Enable vertices, so we are able to select the vertices while in this mode. And also press M key to open the materials window and just apply a default gray material to the mesh. This way the colors are much easier to read because they are not blending with the texture of the mesh beneath. Now we have this, and let's finally start editing the weights. You should always choose which side of the model you are going to skin, because in the end we will mirror the weights to the other side. So if you start skinning the green leg, you also have to skin green arm, and not switch it to blue arm after, so you are able to mirror the weights with just one click. Let's start up the weight tool. It's this small icon here. But the size of the icon does not represent the usefulness of this tool. This tool is very important when skinning, at least for me. The second main tool we will be using is paint weights, together with its settings right here. we will start with the main body parts first. And right here we can see that the blue leg also affects the green one, which we don't want at all. So let's reduce the strength of the brush a bit, just so we have a bit more control over the painting. If you are using a pen with pressure, then you don't have to worry about it that much, but I just use a mouse here. Important thing is to disable paint blend weights here, because with it enabled we would just modify the existing weights, but we want to remove them, not modify. So by holding Alt key when painting, you can remove the weights from the selected bone. Now it means the upper leg will not affect this area anymore. We want to remove it all the way to the middle. Also change brush size if needed. When you turn off the paint weights, you can click on these black lines, which represent the bones. Of course, if you manage to not click on a vertex first, as they have a priority. But this is a fast way how to select bones when skinning. So remove the weight also for the leg on the other side. And the reason why we are doing also the other side is because the mirroring of the weights would again transfer the values back if we don't remove them from both sides. Now this leg. This one is fine. Actually, while we are just checking the values of bones, we can disable the vertices option, so it's easier to select the bones. This one is fine for now. For pelvis we can remove this. Basically you just want to go through the bones and clean them up a bit. Remove the unnecessary areas. As a first pass. Don't overdo it though. If you are not sure, just keep it as it is. We will go through all of these parts manually again, so don't worry too much. But the main point of this is to clean up these middle parts and remove most of the weights that are over the middle. But when doing that, don't forget to do it for both sides, not just one. Okay, that's basically it. Let's now take a closer look. We can start with the simpler things first. Let's enable vertices again and let's see what ankle does. We don't want ankle to affect this upper area at all, because what for? The toes as well, no need for them to affect area this big. This part is actually pretty alright, we can just clean it up a bit. You can switch the selection region to lasso right now, because it will make it easier to select the vertices you want. So for these vertices, let's close painting and open up the weight tool. Here you can see what the values of the vertices are. We don't want this part of the toes to be moving at all, so we can set them to 1. Which means the bone leg R digit 11, which is the toes, will have 100% influence over these vertices. Only this bone will move them. Next, let's select these two and click on loop to select the whole loop of the vertices, and let's give it a value of 1 as well. Okay, and for the next loop, click here on blend to blend the values between the bones that already have a value. Or you could use specific values if you want it, by putting a number here and set weight. And now you can see all the vertices have the same value. For this loop again, we could make it actually a little softer. And for that you can use these buttons here. This one, if you look at the numbers, add a value of increments of 0.05. And scale obviously scales the values. So if we keep clicking on it, it will add value to it faster and faster. If we put it back to 0 and try to scale it, it will of course not work. Okay, so let's set this loop to 0.1. That should be fine. And you can see now even this loop moves a little bit. So basically now I have explained to you all the tools there are to skinning, and the whole process is just using these few things to get the best result you can achieve. So for this loop, let's try blend. But that's too much, so remove the weight a bit. Or add it to the other bone. And this over and over. It needs a lot of practice of course, but we will get through the whole model here, so don't worry, you will learn a lot. This loop may be 0.1. But first actually set it to 1 here for the other bone, so we are sure that no other bone messes with it, and then set the other bone to 0.1. This way you make sure that only these two bones affect these vertices. Next one, we can see that the leg R2 has a weight here, and also down here, which happened because we didn't do the same thing before. So set it here to 1 for the ankle, and for these lower ones we can just zero out the weight for leg R2. It's a very little weight, but we don't want it there nonetheless. When you subtract weights, it gets spread between the other bones, so you have to be careful about that, because it can spread between the bones you don't actually want. In this case, however, we know to which bones it goes, so it's fine. So now the toes bend pretty nicely, and we can consider them done. Let's move on. Here we can see that the heel is deforming, which doesn't make sense. We don't want that. So all of these vertices should be weighted on the ankle bone, 100%. What should only deform is this area here, between ankle and leg. But now the bend is too sharp, so let's try and blend these vertices. But that didn't help too much. Let's try to add weight to ankle here. Now let's try to blend this loop, which is too much again. So let's add back to the leg a bit. But this area is still too sharp. Front is fine, but back is not. We can try to soften it up a bit, but it's still not good enough. We could keep adding the weight back to the heel, but we don't want that because heel should be solid. Which gets us to another solution you should always consider when skinning, that this issue cannot be solved just with skinning. We might need to move the pivot of the bones. We might have to move the pivot from here a bit further back. So that will mean the pivot will not be in the middle anymore, but that doesn't matter that much in this case, because to the front you can physically bend the ankle only a little bit. It's flexible mostly just to the back. It's something similar as with the knee. Knee also really only bends one way. For that you need to turn off the skin modifier first by clicking here, or by pressing edit envelopes again. Because when you have skin on, you cannot select the bones. So turn off the skin modifier by clicking on that small eye next to it. And also down here there is a very important parameter, always deform. I will get back to it in a minute, let's first fix the ankle. Okay, so first we need to turn off the animation mode, because we are going to do the changes to the rig obviously. Never forget to switch between these according to what you are going to do. You will though, because everybody does, but it's essential to do. What I will do now is create a point helper and align it to the knee just to save its current position. Because we are going to edit the ankle, and editing the ankle bone also changes the leg, so I want to know where it was before. Okay, so let's move it to the back, but only by a very little. Something like this maybe, that should be enough. By the way, you can see that even I am not always sure how to set something or where to place it to make sure it will be better. I probably have a better guess of what might work than you do at this point, but even I have to sometimes just try things. Nobody can take a look at a random vertex and say that it should be weighted 20% to this bone, 40 to this one and 40 to this. It's just guessing and trying things out. However, of course in time you will get much better at this guessing, but in the end it will always be only guessing. Okay, align this bone back to the point helper so it's exactly where it was before. And don't forget to copy the settings of this bone and paste it to the other side, so the legs are always identical. Get rid of the helper and we can return to skinning. Let's re-enable the skin modifier and let's talk about the always deform parameter now. This is very important. I have explained this in my videos before several times already, but in short it resets the relationship between the bones and vertices. You have to turn it off and back on after you are done with the changes to the rig. Or even better, turn it off together with skin modifier and then both back on after you are done. If you turn off only the skin modifier and do the changes to the rig, for example like this, after you turn the skin modifier back on, the changes will not get remembered and the mesh will still follow the rig. You have to turn always deform off and on to reset the relationship between the vertices and rig, and only after that the rig is changed and new relationship is set. It might be a bit complicated for now, but basically just keep in mind to always turn it off and back on together with skin modifier when doing the changes to the rig. So let's undo all this we have done here, and yes, the mesh looks like this now, until we reset the always deform. So that's it, let's get back to skinning and let's take a look at what's happening. Right, we did not set the animation mode back on, so let's do that first, and back to skinning. Okay, we can immediately see that it's already better, but let's modify it a bit more. Like so. This front part more to the ankle. These vertices blend a bit more. These back ones a bit less actually. Vertices up here we don't need for ankle at all. And for this last loop, just some small value. Like so. So now the ankle bends pretty well, looks alright, and we can consider it done. Now the calf, like R2. This one will be quite easy. The bottom part is already sorted out because we did it while doing the ankle, of course. So we just need to take a look at the part where we bend the knee. And in this case, that's actually done pretty well by default. We can see it bends quite alright. Maybe the only thing we could do here is to take all of these upper vertices and just remove the weight from them because it's not needed here. It's such a small detail that doesn't actually make much difference in the final result, but I like to have everything clean, as you probably already figured out by now. Okay, let's take a look at the upper leg now. It's not bad, but not good either. I will just change the timeline to something smaller, just to have a bit less sensitivity when dragging the timeline. Okay, so first thing up here. We can again take the paint tool, make it smaller and also strength to something small. Let's remove this up here. The back here is not terrible, but this blend here, let's actually add some weight back to the leg. We have removed it at the beginning and maybe we shouldn't remove it as much, but well, this is one of the few areas where right side will go over to the left side. It's a bit rough, but that's fine for now. If we now take a look at this upper area, the bending of the leg affects a really big area, which is not good. We have to remove all of this stuff. And what we want to achieve is somewhat of a smooth transition here, like this. So remove this as well. The first pass can be quite rough, no need to smooth everything. Here in the back, let's again add some weight like we did in the front. This could still be a bit sharper transition. And also keep in mind that if you set weights for one pose, it will affect and can harm a different pose. So it's important to always check the deformations also for different movements. That's why we have made a skin test animation. Okay, that would be the rough pass with painting. Now let's try and select some vertices. Let's start with blend. I do it like this usually to see if the blend helps what I want to achieve or not. If not, I will also use scaling to move the vertices where I want them. Also use loop and grow functions, like this to select the whole loop. Now let's remove the vertices we don't need and hit grow to select also the ones next to these. Now blend several times, also scale a bit. I am not going to explain every single click I do here though, because it's basically not possible to talk about every click unless you want each of these videos to be 2 hours long, and beside that it would not even be useful. This process is not as straightforward as rigging was, for example. Here you need to make decisions and try them out to see if they work or not. I basically look at individual vertices and try to find those where I think it might be done better and fix those. You also want to check movement and see if it deforms alright. And like I have said, also different poses. This bend, for example, still seems like it's creating a hole, so maybe make it even sharper. Like this. Now maybe blend this a bit more, just something to create a smooth transition. Let's check everything again. Maybe this part could move a bit more. Like that. Maybe even this vertex. You can see that we deal more or less with every single vertex. That's why you always want to skin the lowest low poly model you have. Never apply turbo smooth or any other smoothing which adds polygons. That would be crazy. Let's check out some more details we can find and improve here. This. This also maybe. Okay, now we can consider the leg done, I guess. Let's now take a look at how to mirror the weights to the other side. This is usually done only after the whole skinning is finished, but I want to show you how it works, and it's also a good time to check if everything is alright with the symmetry. Down here you have a mirror mode button. After you press it, the vertices and bones will get colored to green, blue and red. Green and blue is for vertices and bones that have their mirror counterparts, and red are for the ones that don't. You can see that the chest, for example, is red, because it doesn't have any mirror bone, which makes sense. You should have it like this by default. If you don't, and if you also see arms as red, for example, you probably didn't reset something at the beginning, or your model is not zeroed out, or is just not symmetrical, of course. For some small offsets and fixes, you have these two parameters here, mirror offset and mirror threshold. But in our case, everything is nicely symmetrical, so no need for those. Okay, so what I usually do before mirroring is I select a bone from the other side, which is not edited yet, and now to mirror the weights, you have these 4 buttons here. You can mirror bones or vertices. In our case we want vertices, and make sure you are clicking on the correct side. In our case from green to blue. So after you click on it, the weights are mirrored. Actually, to make it more clear, let's remove these weights here for the upper leg, because we didn't do it before. Okay, select the other upper leg again, and let's mirror the weights again. You can immediately see that it mirrored correctly. Now we have to especially check the middle part here if the mirror didn't screw something. But it seems everything is working nicely and it looks fine. Okay, great, that's basically a skin for legs done. Let's end the video here. It probably had quite a lot of information in it, but the process we showed in this video is essentially everything there is to skinning. Now we will just reuse all of this knowledge for the other parts of the character, and we will keep repeating everything we learned. So don't worry if it seems too hard right now. There will be plenty of time to get better in it even in this series. So let's continue. I'm Miloš Černý and thank you for watching.